Part 41. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 417. The word victims not only means victims, but also means sacrifices, and it specifically refers to the kind of sacrifice that uses living animals. The hundreds of corpses stacked on the second floor of the izakaya flashed through Ian's consciousness like a slideshow. He could never forget the frozen expressions of horror on the faces of the victims. His memory was as clear as if it happened yesterday. Same thing. Lan didn't know the names of these people during their lives, nor did he know what kind of people they were or what they had done. The lives of these people might not have any intersection with him in their lives, just like two parallel lines, if there hadn't been this massacre. He never thought that it was some bullshit sacrifice ceremony. It was a naked massacre, a trampling of life by a group of crazy people. When the faces on the puppets opened their eyes, the familiar wailing sound sounded in his mind again. "I don't want to die. Please, don't kill me, I can give you all my money. It hurts, it hurts. Blood. So much blood. Is this my blood?" Lan could not only hear these voices, he could even feel the strong emotions of these people before they died: fear, despair, resentment, that immersive feeling, as if his soul had descended upon the deceased. In the bodies of those who died, it was like dying in their place. Closing his eyes, Lan could see countless undead souls struggling in the mud at his feet. They stretched out their arms with rotting flesh and exposed bones, and grabbed his ankle tightly. The smell of death was like a leech. Along the she climbed up to his knees with his legs and wrapped them around his throat. From that day on, the remaining obsessions of these undead spirits had been haunting him and never disappeared. They were like drowning people, waving their hands, trying to grab everything they could. They caught Lan, but Lan was unable to pull them out of the deep pool of death. They are already dead. Lan did not believe in ghosts and gods, and he did not believe that there was such a thing as the undead in the world. He knew that those wails were just hallucinations, just like the sounds recorded on tapes, playing in his ears over and over again. Lan opened his eyes. The illusory undead wanted to pull him into the abyss together, but their bone claws could no longer grip Ian's body. All distracting thoughts were left behind by Lan. He picked up the gun in his hand and aimed it. Distant target. The puppet has no limbs. Except for the face all over the body, its body shape is like a smaller version of Chiron's mountain of flesh. In the gap between the face and the face, there is sticky black asphalt slowly flowing. This is the original substance of the puppet individuals. Compared with the counterfeit simulated by human tissue, they have a higher density and a color closer to pure black. What the hell are these noises? Marshall on the side covered his ears with his hands and gritted his teeth. "I'm so damn annoyed. Why do these sounds seem to be ringing in my head? Damn it. It's the cry of the sacrifice before it dies," Lan explained. "The faces on that thing come from the sacrifices that were devoured by it." Sacrifice? Living sacrifice? Like the people in the sick village did? Marshall asked. Almost, but the wall of flesh is more like a waste recycling furnace. It decomposes human corpses and reuses them. What it accepts are sacrifice in the material sense. Without those materials, it cannot build the abode of God covered in flesh and blood. What about this guy? Is there any difference? Marshall was stunned for a moment and asked again. He had always criticized the sacrificial behavior of the sick village sect, but considering that most of the people killed were seriously ill, and surviving would only increase the pain and torture, he never complained to Chiron. Protest. What they sacrificed was the consciousness of these sacrifices. Consciousness? Could it be that these people? Marshall pointed to the faces on the puppets. Are these people the subjects of the telekinetic living experiment project? How come there are so many? And, why are there still old people and child? No, they are all ordinary people. Lan shook his head. When the incident in East 9th District occurred, Marshall had already escaped to the sick village, so it is normal that he did not know about this tragedy. The heretic sect planned a massacre. They killed thousands of civilians and took their brains. Although I don't know what they did to the brains of the victims. But it is obvious that the brains of those who died, a considerable part of consciousness, should have been preserved in some form. What do they do collecting this stuff for? To create a powerful monster that they can drive. Is it this ugly thing in front of you? Yekelan nodded. They are all a bunch of lunatics. Marshall spat hard on the ground, pushed a grenade into the launch tube hanging under the assault rifle, and pulled the trigger on the puppet individual. Dong! The cylindrical grenade came out of the barrel. The moment it left the launch tube, Marshall even used his materialized thoughts to push it again, causing the grenade to fly towards the puppet individual at several times the speed. However, just when the rifle grenade was still about 5 meters away from the puppet, its flight speed suddenly dropped to 0. The iron-gray metal cylinder was frozen in mid-air. In the next second, starting from the tail of the grenade, the metal shell suddenly began to deform. The entire grenade was like a metal ingot placed under a heavy forging machine. In the blink of an eye, it was crushed into thin slices. The explosives filled in it were detonated at this time, but the flames of the explosion could not escape from this square inch. The flames, shock waves, and fragments were all compressed in a space the size of a fingertip. If you use astronomy to describe it in terms, this is not an explosion, but closer to the concept of collapse. Collapse and explosion are two completely opposite concepts. Explosion releases energy outwards, while collapse gathers all the mass inward, and ultimately forms a celestial body with extremely high density under the influence of its own gravity. The light generated by the explosion was finally condensed into a dazzling spot, which flickered for a moment and then disappeared. As for the shell of the grenade, it turned into a round and solid metal ball the size of a soybean and fell to the ground. There was a muffled sound of dong. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 418. Sure enough, this guy has abilities similar to mine, Marshall said solemnly. From the residual consciousness attached to those black spikes, we can know that the puppet's body definitely has strength that far exceeds that of a perfect individual. The so-called perfect individual is only for human beings. Experimental subjects like Marshall are already a ceiling-like existence, but for the creations of Alpha civilization, the upper limit is far higher than that. Long-distance attacks are ineffective against it, at least the weapons in our hands are like this, Marshall said to Kaylan. We can only fight at close range. The effective range of my ability is 15 meters. I need you and that little girl. Help me contain this ugly thing. If you get close to it, you will die. The speaker was Zilugo. From the moment she entered the bridge, she never took her eyes away from the puppet. Are you so sure? You have to give it a try, right? Marshall grinned. If I read correctly, the interception range of the grenade is 5 meters, and its absolute control area has not yet covered me. I can attack it. No, it's not 5 meters. It's 50 meters. Zilugo finally turned his head and glanced at Marshall. As long as you walk forward 11 meters, you will become like that grenade. 50 meters. How did you know? Marshall was startled and took a step back subconsciously. Zilugo did not answer his question, but walked up behind Kaylan and Marshall and put his palms on their backs. At this moment, Kaylan and Marshall's vision suddenly changed dramatically. The entire interior of the bridge turned into pure white. Only the puppet individuals in the distance were black, like a big ball in the air. It's like ink smeared on white paper. Countless black tentacles stretched out from its body, covering every corner within 50 meters, like ink stains spreading along the fibers of paper. These things are invisible to the naked eye. If Kaylan and Marshall rashly break into the territory of these black tentacles, they will be captured by them in an instant. It turned out to be a trap. Marshall frowned, and the fingers of his right hand trembled slightly, and then he condensed a conical drill 10 meters in front of him, and then controlled the drill that was materialized with his mind, and slowly push forward slowly. He originally wanted to condense the drill bit at the extreme distance, but he found that the unsubstantial power of his mind dissipated directly after entering that area. The suppressive force he felt on Ze Logo not long ago, actually appeared again in this puppet individual. 11 meters directly in front is the domain of the puppet individual, and Marshall's attack range is 15 meters. There is a 4-meter space overlap between the two. Although Marshall cannot attack the puppet's body, it is different from those black. It takes a lot of effort, but it can still be done. As soon as the cone-shaped drill entered the range of 50 meters, those black tentacles immediately surged up, and they struck like whips. At this moment, Marshall thought, and immediately made the invisible drill rotate at high speed. "Stand up!" The black tentacles that came into contact with the drill bit were instantly crushed to pieces. This scene made Marshall's frown relax a little. These tentacles were not as strong as he thought, at least in terms of the degree of concentration of his willpower. His drill was way off. "It's not very strong, these tentacles. If I materialize my mind power and protect my whole body, I should be able to rush through this middle zone," Marshall said to himself. These tentacles are not used for attack, however. Ze Logo's words were like a basin of cold water poured on his head. These tentacles are just a means of detection. What about its attack methods? As soon as Marshall finished speaking, a piercing scream rang out in the depths of his mind. His whole body was shaken, and the solid mental power drill collapsed in an instant. My head feels like it's going to explode." Marshall immediately covered his head and squatted down. I have to find something to plug my ears." "It's no use plugging your ears." Kaylan, who had been observing the puppets, shook his head. "You just plugged your ears, but did the wails of the undead weaken at all? These sounds are not heard with your ears, but directly invade the depths of your mind. All you can do is get used to them." "But that scream just now was too damn sharp, as if an awl was piercing my brain," Marshall said, seeming to feel something sticky and hot. It flowed down the sides of Renjong. He stretched out his hand and wiped it, and there was a large deep red mark on the back of his hand. This doesn't seem to be a purely mental attack." Marshall raised his eyes and glanced at Kaylan. "Why don't you have a nosebleed?" "This is a pure mental attack." Kaylan took a deep breath and said to him, "Didn't you say that without the protection of your mind, your brain would have exploded long ago?" Marshall was stunned for a moment, then took a sharp breath. The scream that sounded deep in his mind not only destroyed his mental power drill, but also caused a crack in his self-protection. It was precisely because of this that blood overflowed from his nasal cavity. This trauma was not caused by the puppet individual, but by his own thoughts. That scream was equivalent to tearing off the bandage he used to wrap the wound. "Then this ugly thing seems to have completely restrained me." Marshall gritted his teeth and shook his head. "Don't even rush over and fight it up close. If I scream like this a few more times, I'm afraid my head is really going to explode." Hearing what Marshall said, Kaylan couldn't help but see the death method of the heretic leader's substitute. His head exploded from the inside out. Just imagining that scene was scary enough. "Why don't you return to the hangar first and leave this place to me and Ze Logo?" Kaylan said. He was a little confused as to why the puppet had never launched an active attack. Even the scream just now was based on passive defense. What was it waiting for? Or, what are the limitations of its attack methods? "Are you kidding me? We've already come this far and I won't go back." Marshall wiped away the bleeding nose. "If I go back, wouldn't I make that little dwarf Akira Asano laugh at me?" "He won't laugh at you, and neither will we," Kaylan said. "Stop talking, I don't have a few days to live anyway. Instead of waiting for death, it's better to have a good fight." Marshall raised his head and suddenly laughed. "When I escaped from the Ark, at that time, I thought that the end of my life was to die in the wilderness. Later, I thought that the end of my life was in those suffocating cocoons of flesh, and later, I thought that I would finish my final journey in that smelly space station. The journey, but now it seems like this is my real destination. This paragraph of yours can be made into a poem, and it's called The End. In this atmosphere, Kaylan suddenly told a cold joke that made no sense. Okay, please help me publish it after you return to the Ark. Marshall smiled. By the way, if I really die here, if there is still a body left, don't take it back to the ground or to the space station, just throw it into space. After saying that, Marshall took a step forward and pulled the trigger. Bullets poured out from the muzzle, but none of them could enter within 5 meters of the puppet. However, Marshall seemed not to care at all. He pulled out the empty magazine and replaced it with another. New. He was still walking forward, and at this time, he was less than 3 meters away from the area covered with black tentacles. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 420. Finally, Marshall crossed the line. Ziluo's palm was still on K-Ian's back, so Kaylan could still see things that were originally invisible to the naked eye. Marshall's willpower appeared as a faint blue in this field of vision. He put an armor on his body that was made from the power of his mind. The black tentacles kept beating on the armor and then broke into pieces. Although the scene looks a bit like beating an egg against a stone, under the successive attacks of the black tentacles, the thickness of the blue armor is reducing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The collapse of each black tentacle can disintegrate a small amount. Part of the armor, countless fine powders flew up from the surface of the armor, and quickly turned into nothingness. Although Marshall is constantly repairing the armor, the gap between the repair speed and the consumption speed is getting wider and wider. It is estimated that the armor will be completely destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Marshall has fallen into a situation where it is difficult to move forward, but he can only push forward with all his strength. If he chooses to retreat, all defenses will completely collapse in an instant. Ziluo, pull him back, Kaylan shouted. The girl nodded and stretched out a slender arm forward. Suddenly, several blade-like thoughts penetrated into the puppet's control area, cutting off all the black tentacles around Marshall, and Marshall it was to seize this opportunity and quickly retreat from this quagmire. Damn, this guy is so strong. Marshall wiped away the blood that overflowed from his nostrils again and gasped. Its absolute control area is the same as that of the radiation field. It's just like the corridor. Every step forward, the intensity will increase several times. Are you okay? Kaylan glanced at Marshall. Not only was his nose bleeding, but there was also a small amount of blood seeping out of the corners of his eyes and ears. His face was an abnormal purple-brown color. This was the capillaries under the skin, caused by extensive rupture of blood vessels. It's okay, I won't die for the time being. Marshall spat out a mouthful of bloody spit. When I rushed in just now, this thing was screaming in my head again. Fortunately, I was prepared this time. Otherwise, I probably won't be able to come back. But what makes me feel strange is that this thing obviously has the power to kill us easily, but why hasn't it taken the initiative to attack us? Kaylan said with some confusion. After all, this is not a plot-oriented standalone game. NPCs and monsters will not disconnect when game players speak lines. Isn't this because of you? Kaylan looked at Ziluo. Ziluo shook his head and said, it took away the thoughts that originally belonged to those sacrifices, so it is stronger than me. Much stronger, the expressionless girl added. The thoughts of sacrifices, are those obsessions? Kaylan asked. These things sound very ethereal. Can they be used to improve strength? Yes, the person who answered Kaylan was not Ziluo, but Marshall. If the idea she is referring to is spiritual power, then for people like us, as long as we can integrate it, we can improve our strength. You said the group of people from the heretical sect killed hundreds of people in order to create this thing. If the spiritual power of these hundreds of people were gathered together, It would be a very terrifying force. A terrifying power? But, these people are just ordinary people. Let alone 1,000 people. Even if there are 10,000 people, if they are asked to use their minds to lift a stone, it is absolutely impossible to succeed. If quantitative changes in something like mental power could lead to qualitative changes, the world would have been in chaos long ago, Kaylan said in confusion. Not to mention anything else, there were nearly 10 billion people on the earth in the old era, and there would be people imagining some weird things in their heads every moment. If only because enough people imagined something, it would become a reality. To be honest, the earth would have been destroyed before the ark was built. But they can strengthen the thoughts of these people, because these people are already dead. There is no need to consider whether they can withstand the power of thoughts amplified by that thing, so they can attack the dead people without restraint. The brain is strengthened, which is equivalent to gathering the power of thousands of experimental subjects together, Marshall said solemnly, although I don't know how the carrier carrying this power was created. In short, they did arrive. That thing refers to the equipment used to stimulate the subject's willpower in the telekinetic human experiment. Well, it's a cabinet made of some weird alloy. Well, it looks like a coffin. They will put the experimental subject into the coffin, then fill it with LCL liquid, and then conduct the experiment. Hundreds of electrodes are inserted into the subject's head, just like acupuncture in ancient Chinese medicine. When that thing is activated, the experimental subject lying inside will fall into an extremely absurd and extremely real dream. If you can wake up from the dream, it is equivalent to completing an strengthening process. Marshall recalled. What if you don't wake up? Then go straight to the waste disposal process. Then, is there a high chance of waking up? I don't know, it varies from person to person. I have experienced 17 times of strengthening, which is considered one of the best among experimental subjects. But when I was strengthened for the last time, I almost drowned in that strange dream. According to those people in white coats, I lay there for 11 days, and they thought I would never wake up. As for Akira Asano, he seems to have only been strengthened 4 times. P.S. Thank you for your concern. I went to the hospital today for a checkup. The white blood cells and hypersensitivity C are a bit high, and the body is a bit inflamed. Other blood items are relatively stable. The doctor said there was no big problem and that I just need to rest well. Then he prescribed estazolam tablets because my sleep quality was not good at night. I hope I can have a good sleep today. Maybe it's mostly psychological factors. After all, the symptoms of a cold are very similar to the relapse of leukemia, including fever, fatigue, dizziness, nausea, and body aches. Every time I catch a cold, I'm scared to death. Every time it's time for a review. The more obvious the symptoms become, the more you consider whether to seek consultation from a psychiatrist. It may be better. In addition, I should take another leave at the end of this month. It has been 3 months since the bone puncture last month. After this bone puncture, it will be a full year after the bone puncture, and then I will have a bone puncture every 6 months. PPS. Thanks to Halio09 for the 2000 starting coins. Thank book friend 20210605224149845 for the 1500 starting coins. Thank Shangshu Nyota for the 300 starting coins. Thank 00360 degrees for the 588 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 421. So this enhanced equipment is the legacy of the Alpha civilization. According to Marshall's description, Kaylan couldn't help but think of something. It is said that it was found from an S-class ruins. It seems that many people died in order to transport this thing out. I am not sure the authenticity of this rumor, but there are quite a few left on the surface of the device. Bullet marks, I've seen this with my own eyes, Marshall said. Then where is this equipment now? Is it on the Ark, or in the sick village? Kaylan asked. How could I know this? Anyway, when I was sent out of the experimental base, the thing was still in the base. As for later, Whether it was sealed or destroyed has nothing to do with me. As for the sick village, that is even more impossible. If that thing was here, you would have been dealt with long ago. Is it my turn to take action? The missing reinforced equipment, the victim's deprived will, and extremely similar attack methods, when these clues are connected together, the answer is readily apparent. The Iron Maiden who once served as Ze Logo's shelter is likely to it's a similar enhanced device, or, maybe it's the one Marshall and Akira Asano once used. Putting a shell full of medieval atmosphere on a high-tech equipment manufactured by Alpha Civilization, it is not impossible for heretical sects to do such a thing. As for why this thing fell into the hands of the heretical sect, the hidden secrets and details will not be clear for a while. Anyway, the thing is now in Chiron's hands. How to deal with this hot potato is something the undead crew will need to consider. As for Kaylan, his only goal now is to get rid of this extremely ugly monster in front of him. It has invaded the control system of this airship. Ian's gaze shifted to the console on the side. He saw countless sharp black spikes piercing the metal panel of the console and penetrating deep into the electronic components. At the end of these black spikes, there is a thin cable connected to the puppet's body. In the middle of the bridge, on the captain's seat, lay a crooked, headless corpse. Judging from the corpse's attire, the deceased was none other than the captain of the Greece himself. The fracture at his neck was very flat. This not only reminded Kaylan of the pair of scythe hands with huge shearing power of the first monster he encountered in the hangar. It seems that this captain was probably killed by that monster. Killed. The blood spurting out from his neck dyed the upper body of the captain's uniform and most of the back of the chair crimson. More than a dozen black spikes penetrated his hands and feet and were firmly fixed on the seat behind him. It looks like a prisoner of war crucified by the Roman army in the old era. This cruel method was obviously intended to remove the captain's head while he was still alive, or to be more precise, his brain. Kaylan turned his attention back to the puppet again. Soon, he spotted the weather-beaten face of the captain of the Greek in a corner. Unlike other faces that were wailing or glaring with anger, the captain's face had his eyes tightly closed and his brows furrowed, as if he was thinking about something, forming a perfect match with the twitching and twisting faces around him. A sharp contrast. It's reading the captain's memory. When it finishes digesting those things, it will be able to master the control method of this airship, Kaylan said with a frown. Are you trying to stall for time with us? Marshall said. Is this thing so obsessed with destroying that space station? This may be an order given to it by the heretic section. Its first task is to destroy the South 16th District space station. There are too many secrets hidden on that space station, and the enhanced equipment you used, there is a high probability that it is also on the space station now, Kaylan analyzed. This is impossible. That device can't appear anywhere, and it can't appear in the space station. Marshall shook his head. There's no way the guy behind the wall could lie to me. Chiron did not lie to you, but this thing came to the door on his own, and he had no way to turn it away. Kaylan curled his lips. Otherwise, where do you think this monster and Ze logo came from? Coming. To be honest, if that equipment is really in the space station, then I would rather it destroy the space station. Marshall suddenly sighed. It's just that 10,000 people have to be buried with this damn thing. This kind of I can't do it. Ze logo, is there a way to pass through the realm of this thing? If it can't attack the main body, no matter how much firepower it pours, it will be in vain. Kaylan looked at Ze logo, placing his hope on this inhuman girl. It has the ability to manipulate time. If we get close to it, we will be trapped in static time. Only you can crack its ability, Ze logo said. Cracked? Is it just like before? Kaylan recalled the scene in Area F of the space station. That is to say, there must be direct contact. But if I can directly contact that guy, then I just launch a direct attack on its body. If you want to contact its body, you must first break the time stop by contacting it. This is obviously an endless loop. What kind of ability to manipulate time? What kind of contact? Why can't I understand even half of what you said? Marshall looked at Kaylan and Ze in confusion. You just understand that I have a way to break the absolute control field of this thing, but I have to touch it. But if I want to touch it, I have to break its absolute control field first, although it sounds a bit convoluted. But basically it's a chicken or egg problem, an endless loop with no solution. Kaylan said with a troubled face. Ze, isn't there any way you can throw me in, just like I just said, like having someone throw you out? I can't do it, it's much stronger than me, Ze said. Kaylan knew that this girl would not lie, and she would never talk in circles. If she said she couldn't do it, then she really couldn't do it. It took a lot of effort to get here, but it can't be a dead end. Marshall gritted his teeth and said, how about, I charge again, just in case I can get closer. You were almost killed before you even walked 5 meters away. It will be the same if you try again. Kaylan rejected Marshall's suggestion, that is no different from dying. Then what should we do? Just watch it control this airship. Wait a minute, I seem to have an idea. Since I can't touch it, it should be the same if it takes the initiative to touch me, right? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 422. I have to find a way to make this guy take the initiative to attack me. Kaylan thought, it would be great if he knew the taunting skills of the tank profession in MMORPG. With a battle cry and a strong taunt, the boss seems to be lost. He rushed towards him like a fool. However, in reality, even if Kaylan greeted all the 18 generations of this thing's ancestors, nothing would happen. But this idea is generally correct. What needs to be changed is the way of ridicule. What kind of taunting method is needed to attract the hatred of individual puppets? Ian's peripheral vision suddenly caught sight of a control terminal on one side. The absolute control area radius of the puppet individual is 50 meters, which almost covers most of the bridge area. However, this independent control terminal is outside this range. This is a backup terminal used to manually adjust the course of the airship. Under normal circumstances, as long as the automatic navigation system of the airship does not malfunction, this thing is basically idle, but idle is idle, this is still an issue. It is a genuine Taiwanese control terminal. As long as you have sufficient authority, you can issue various commands to the grease airship through this terminal. The authority that Kaylan has is the highest authority above that of the captain. As long as we use this terminal to lock all the weapon systems of the Greek airship, no, locking is not safe enough. After all, the guy is using physical intrusion methods, and there is no guarantee that he will use violent means to unlock it. Simply input the self-destruct command directly to all weapons. In addition, we have to find a way to destroy the engine to prevent it from directly using the airship itself as a weapon. In this way, the grease airship will be useless to the puppet individual. Lost all value, Kaylan thought. Anyway, the logistics team has been wiped out. Even if Kaylan dismantles the empty ship, no one will probably scold him. As for the Soma Consortium, they should reimburse the repair costs for themselves, right? This is the only way. After making up his mind, Kaylan quickly ran towards the control terminal. What can we do? Marshall was stunned and followed him. Since the puppet individual wants to carry out the task of destroying the South 16th District Space Station, then it will definitely come to stop my action. But you haven't said what you plan to do yet. Use this control terminal to disarm all the weapons on the airship, Kaylan said quickly. At this time, his palm was already pressed on the touch screen of the control terminal. Beep, identity authentication completed. Kaylan, male, special consultant of Soma Consortium, authority level, highest grease high-speed airship. A 2 intelligent control terminal is serving you. A pleasant female voice said from beside the screen came from the speaker, and a virtual keyboard formed by holographic projection appeared in mid-air. Switch to the weapon control system, Kaylan shouted to the control terminal. Although this is a terminal used to adjust the course, the internal circuits are directly connected to the main control system of the airship. With Ian's authority, even if he wants to call up a short movie stored in a personal terminal of a certain crew member, no problem. Executing. The picture on the screen turned, and a cross-section of the structural diagram of the Greece airship suddenly appeared. From this picture, it can be seen that in addition to the electromagnetic guns used for air defense, the Greece this time it is also equipped with a battleship-level plasma cannon and 24 guided missiles with tactical-level nuclear warheads. With these weapons, it would be enough to destroy 10 such space stations, let alone one South 16th District space station. More than enough. Marshal. Zelo. Keep an eye on that big guy. If it comes to stop me, help me block its attack. If it attacks with its body, find a way to clamp down on the part of its body that attacks. Kaylan glanced at the puppet in the distance, and then turned his attention back to the screen of the control terminal. He had already taken off the gloves of his spacesuit, and his 10 fingers were tapping rapidly on the virtual keyboard. Tactical nuclear warheads number 1, 2, and 3 have locked onto the target. Confirm launch. Launch. Kaylan used the little finger of his right hand to slide over the enter key like a dragonfly, and 3 guided missiles with tactical nuclear warheads followed a long trail and flew out from the launch silo on the side of the ship. The targets he selected for the missile were 3 asteroids at the limit of the range. In fact, even if he randomly selected a few asteroids in the low Earth orbit of Alpha Star, with the strike radius of a tactical-grade nuclear warhead, they would not be able to hit them at all. Spread to the space station. Not to be on the safe side, he still set extremely distant targets for these missiles, and in order to prevent the puppet individuals from seizing the weapons control system and modifying the missile targets, he deleted the guidance program immediately after launching the missiles. Redirect function inside. Is that thing still silent? Kaylan waved his hand, and 3 more missiles flew out into the dark and deep universe without looking back. No, Marshall replied. Standing between Kaylan and the puppet, he bent his waist and used his hands to hold up a shield made of more than 10 layers of materialized thoughts in front of him. It doesn't matter if it remains silent. As long as I disarm all the weapons on the empty ship, then most of our mission goals for this trip will be completed, Kaylan said. The number 7, number 8, and number 9 tactical nuclear warheads have been launched. Launch them all. If it weren't for the fact that the Greece airship only had 3 missile silos, he would have even wanted to write a full missile launch program on the spot to launch all 24 missiles at once. It's moving. Hey. This guy is in a hurry. It's finally in a hurry. As soon as Marshall screamed, his whole body flew backwards as if he had been hit hard, and a mouthful of blood with broken internal organs and even it all splashed onto Ian's body. The dozens of layers of mental shields were actually broken by the puppet individuals in just an instant. Dozens of black spikes wrapped in the victim's mental powers continued to move towards the person standing at the control. Kaylan shot in front of the terminal. It's just spikes. Kaylan shook his head with regret. These things do not belong to the puppet's body, and contact with them cannot break the puppet's domain. After Marshall's dozen layers of shields were torn apart, Zelo's petite body took the initiative to face these black spikes. She did not use time stop or her mind power, but directly used her body to hit these black spikes. Next. P.S. Thanks to Simple for the 1000 starting coins, thanks to my black frame, which is a bit handsome, and PK99 for the 500 starting coins. When I saw this guy's ID, why did the second half of the sentence suddenly pop up in my head? My waistband is a bit high. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 423. The scene of the half-meter-long spikes penetrating the girl's body was shocking, but it was not bloody, because there was no blood flowing out at all. These black spikes seemed to disappear directly after piercing Ze Lugo's body. Generally, it did not penetrate from behind her, but after blocking all the spikes, the girl's face showed a strange paleness, and there was still a faint shadow in this paleness. It's flowing. The black spikes carry the negative emotions of the dead. Ze Lugo staggered back a step. Compared with the physical attacks of the black spikes, the mental attacks were more lethal to her. I'm already at the fastest speed. As he spoke, the last 3 missiles were pushed into the launch silo. This leaves only the plasma cannon and the main engine of the airship. Start the plasma cannon self-destruction program, Kaylan ordered. Please enter the default 4-digit password. 2887. Please enter the second password to confirm again. 7355608. The password verification is correct and the plasma cannon self-destruction program is being started. At this critical moment, the puppet's body finally made some movement. Several twisted faces were torn apart from the inside by a huge force, and a black fleshy tentacle protruded from each torn face. Different from the previous black tentacles, these tentacles they have entities, and they grow from the inside of the puppet individual. In other words, these tentacles are part of the puppet individual's body. As long as you can touch these tentacles, you can crack the domain of the puppet individual. But in the next second, the 3 characters CNM appeared in Ian's heart. On the surface of these black fleshy tentacles, a large number of black spikes suddenly grew. From a distance, they looked like whips made of prickly thorns and vines. But compared to whips, the diameter of these tentacles is closer to a mace made of soft plastic material. Kaylan had seen this thing in a sales email before. It was a toy with a special purpose, but the wolf teeth on that toy were also made of soft plastic. But the hardness of these spikes in front of me is comparable to that of alloy. Originally, Kaylan planned to fight hard to take the attack and touch the body of the puppet, but now it seems that as long as he is hit by these wolf fang whips, he will have to deal with it directly. These vine whips covered with black spikes danced in the air for a while, then suddenly extended and whipped towards Kaylan, who was dozens of meters away with a harsh sound of breaking wind. Ze Lugo. Is there a way to catch these tentacles? In other words, slow them down, Kaylan shouted to Ze Lugo. He had no intention of dodge. This was an opportunity, a rare opportunity. Okay, but the tentacles will still retain extremely high attack power. Ze Lugo nodded and raised his hand. As long as it doesn't kill me instantly. In the blink of an eye, those tentacles had been thrown in front of Kaylan, but just when they were about to hit Kaylan, their speed suddenly dropped, as if they were in slow motion. Hiss, I feel like the strength on this thing is still very scary. Kaylan took a deep breath, selected a tentacle directly in front of him, reached forward with his hands, but his feet kept starting to retreat in response to the tentacles. The accompanying terrifying impact. But before he touched this tentacle, another tentacle broke through Ze Lugo's blockage and attacked him from another direction. This was a tentacle that had not been slowed down at all. If it hits him, Kaylan will definitely die. Leave this thing to me, Marshall's voice sounded behind Kaylan. He rushed forward suddenly, holding his hands in the shape of tiger claws towards the tentacle. In front of him, a pair of naked eyes could not see it. His big hands took shape in an instant, and he held the tentacles covered with spikes tightly in the same posture. But in an instant, the big hand formed by the power of his mind disintegrated into pieces, and the thick black tentacles of the arm hit Marshall's chest heavily. Kaylan only heard a crisp sound of broken bones. Marshall's entire chest was dented, and sharp black spikes penetrated from his back, stained with bright red and hot blood. Marshall, Kaylan shouted, but Marshall could no longer hear his voice. When the black spikes tore his body apart, his brain had been destroyed by the out-of-control willpower. Under the influence of the cranial pressure, blood mixed with brain plasma and tissue fragments spurted out from the corners of his eyes, nostrils, and ear canals. The next second, his head exploded as he had described before, like it was like a watermelon being thrown against the wall. Kaylan mourned the dead Marshal for a brief moment in his heart, and then focused on the tentacles in front of him again. The battle was not over. If the puppet individual could not be completely eliminated, Marshal's sacrifice would have no meaning. Significance. The tentacles were less than 20 centimeters away from Kaylan. Lugo's body had begun to tremble slightly. Kaylan knew that she had reached her limit and this was the best chance she could get for herself. You. Kaylan swore a curse word, made a fist with his left hand and swung it out, hitting the nearby tentacle. The black spikes penetrated Ian's palm and tore open his mouth at the same time. His entire hand was instantly stained red with blood, and all 4 fingers were broken and turned back at a weird angle. But Kaylan did not flinch. The black spikes do not belong to the puppet's body, but the tentacles underneath are. With a pop sound, the bloody palm finally hit the mucous membrane on the surface of the fleshy tentacles. At the same time, Kaylan also heard an unusual sound like glass being shattered. The absolute control area of the puppet individual has been lifted. Lugo, push me out, Kaylan shouted. He had completely ignored the injury to his left hand. He held the assault rifle in his arms and pushed the bolt hard with the tip of his elbow. A majestic and gentle force supported his body and pushed him to the front of the puppet in an instant. Go to hell! Kaylan roared, thrust the muzzle of the assault rifle directly into the mouth of a face, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Lugo also launched an attack on the puppet body at the same time. Kaylan didn't even feel the strong wind brought by those mental blades as they passed by. Several extremely deep ravines had opened on the body surface of the puppet body, and a large amount of sticky substance had appeared. The black asphalt spurted out everywhere, and even Kaylan was not spared and was drenched all over. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 424. The bullets in the magazine were emptied almost instantly. Kaylan didn't bother to change the magazine. He directly held the undermounted shotgun installed under the barrel and fired an 18.4 mm caliber No. 00 Deer bullets, Note 1, are loaded into the gun chamber. The moment the bolt is pulled and loaded, the trigger is pulled and the firing is completed. Bang! 8 steel balls with a caliber of 0.33 inches instantly penetrated the depths of the throat. The face, whose mouth was blocked by the gun barrel, let out an inhuman scream, and black blood continued to shoot out from all the orifices. Come out! The last shot was for Elisha and the many agents who died in the East 9th District incident. Bang! This shot was fired for Major Ashkarni and the sacrificed garrison soldiers. Bang! This shot was for MS Victoria. After 3 shots, the face was completely shattered. The fragmented flesh blocked the barrel of the shotgun. Black, sticky juice flowed along the lines of the receiver, and then dripped on the ground. Kaylan threw away the assault rifle, pulled out a large caliber hunting pistol, and inserted it fiercely into the eye socket of the other face. The eyeball exploded, and the debris and pus and blood were on Ian's side. A black stain was left on his face. The 7 bullets in this magazine are used to mourn Liao Zilang and Marshal. Boom, 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 boom. Kaylan pulled the trigger continuously and emptied all the magazines of the pistol. That face let out a sharp howl, and next to it, another ferocious and fierce face that originally belonged to a middle-aged and elderly man stretched out desperately towards Kaylan. Its upper and lower jaws kept opening and closing, as if it wanted to bite out Ian's throat. The vitality is so damn tenacious. Kaylan pulled the pistol out of the eye socket of the previous face, then smashed it hard, and the alloy gun body and sleeve slammed into the face that wanted to. In the biting mouth, all its teeth will be broken off. You monster, it's time to let the souls of those who died rest in peace. Kaylan took out a grenade, pulled off the safety ring, stuffed it into the toothless mouth, and then pushed it hard with the barrel of the gun. It pushed deep into the throat. Boom! A dull explosion sounded from inside the puppet's body. A dozen faces drooped, and black asphalt like blood slowly flowed down from their closed eyes. But when Kaylan turned his attention to the other side of the puppet, he realized that Ze-Lugo was far more ruthless than him. Just like the top Japanese chefs are processing fish, the invisible blade continuously slices the body of the puppet into thin and almost transparent slices. Even the splashed black asphalt is covered by a wave of invisible power was trapped in the air. "Are you looking for something?" Kaylan glanced at Ze-Lugo, who looked serious, and asked. "Yes." "At the core of the puppet individual, there is another half of the crystal," Ze-Lugo replied. "Half a crystal? Wait, are you talking about the thing that integrated into my body? What was absorbed by my body is actually only half of that thing." "Well, that's what I asked you to take away after I separated it. If I had a complete crystal, I would have transformed successfully before being bombarded. At that time, I would completely become that a person's puppet is at his mercy," Ze-Lugo explained to Kaylan while continuing to slice the individual puppets into pieces. "Then the call I heard at that time. Was it also because of? Well, if you want to separate the crystal, you must find someone who can serve as a carrier. Apart from that person, you are the only one left among all the humans I can sense. So, that guy didn't lie to me. He and I are really different individuals. But why is it me? Is it because I absorbed the thing sealed in that stone tablet?" Kaylan scratched his hair in distress, only to find that his hair had been lumped into a ball by the sticky black asphalt. The disgusting feeling was simply difficult to describe in words. However, after coming into contact with that stone tablet, the only abilities I gained were the language ability of Alpha Civilization and the memory fragments sealed by Alpha Civilization. Those are all things on the level of consciousness. For my body itself it didn't have any impact. But my body started to become different from normal people, after the East 9th District incident, that is, after fusing the half of the crystal you gave me. Kaylan continued, "I think that the human beings who can be used as the carrier of crystal in your mouth must have very high requirements for the physical body. But at that time, my physical body could only be regarded as a relatively strong ordinary human being, and nothing else. It is said that Akira Asano, Leighton, and Jolajitu are all much better physically than me. No matter how I think about it, I can't think of anything special about me." "I don't know," Ze-Lugo replied, "I have no memory of childhood and dormancy. My self-awareness was only awakened after the sacrifice ceremony. All my knowledge comes from those who were used as sacrifices. The dead, the man, Chiron, and you, your question, I can't answer." Kaylan lowered his hand helplessly. Although Ze-Lugo can speak much more fluently now than a few hours ago, in a sense, she is less than a year away from being born. Using human standards, it is still just a baby. Although she is a creation of Alpha Civilization, she can't even speak the language of Alpha Civilization, let alone the secrets related to crystallization. Maybe you have to ask the founder of the heretical sect about this kind of thing. As for his double, it was obviously brainwashed before being sent here, and even Chiron couldn't dig out the memory of the double. Come up with something useful. But what I can confirm is that the reason why you are able to fit in with this crystal is because of yourself and has nothing to do with the stone tablet." Ze-Lugo suddenly said, "That stone tablet and this crystal are of the same type. Even if your teammates come into contact with the steel at that time, the steel will not be activated." You and that person are the same kind." Ze-Lugo looked into K-Ian's eyes and said, "It's not because you both inherited things from the Alpha Civilization, but because you were the same kind from the moment you were born. You and his relationship is like that between me and the puppet individual." "You mean that you are not a normal human being after birth?" This statement, I find it hard to accept. Kaylan shook his head as he thought to himself, "I am not a baby born naturally from a woman's womb. I am born from fertilization, from egg to embryo to baby. My status has been monitored by machines. If my genes deviate from those of normal humans, whether I mutate into a monster or evolve into some kind of Superman, the monitoring equipment should be there at the next step. It's better to discover it as soon as possible. If that's the case, then my life in the first 20 years should have been different. I don't know, but I have a feeling, Zilugo said, suddenly looking at Marshall's headless body in the distance. You and them are not the same kind. Can I understand that you are scolding me for not being human? Kaylan suddenly didn't know what kind of expression to make. He could only twitch the corners of his mouth, point his finger at the tip of his nose, and asked half complainingly, half self-deprecatingly. Road. I'm not scolding you. Zilugo shook his head. I'm just stating to you the information collected by my sensory organs, and it doesn't contain any insulting meaning. Moreover, I don't think the sentence "not a human being" is considered a curse. This sentence is just a curse. You are still young. Don't be led astray by that pervert who doesn't want to be a human being. Besides, aren't you looking forward to life as a human being? Then remember, I am a person. Well, you will also be a person from now on. We are all human beings, not some random monsters. Do you understand? Zilugo looked at Kaylan expressionlessly, tilted his head, paused for a few seconds as if thinking about something, and then nodded. I have to say, if you ignore the blood stains on the girl's body and what she is doing, she looks really cute. She will definitely become a popular character in any drama. Anyway, the current audience doesn't care what the character is, as long as he looks good. By the way, since you said that I am different from ordinary humans, can you tell me in detail what is different? Kaylan suddenly remembered this matter and asked quickly. Zilugo, I can't explain it, it's just a feeling. Come on, it's useless to ask. Kaylan shook the black asphalt on his hand with some disappointment. The puppet individual should be considered dead. The human faces on it had closed their eyes. No matter how much Zilugo sliced it into pieces, it still stopped screaming. Kaylan simply stopped paying attention to the piece of rotten meat and turned around and walked towards Marshall's corpse. He collected all the scattered fragments of Marshall's skull and wrapped them in his cloak. There was still a trace of warmth in Marshall's body, and his limbs were not yet stiff. Kaylan stuffed the cloak wrapped with bone fragments into his arms, and then carried his body to the door of the emergency cabin. This emergency rescue capsule is an escape device used in emergencies. Unlike a lifeboat, this thing is about the same size as a coffin. Only one person can lie down in a rescue capsule, and it does not have any power device. After the airship is launched, it can only drift in the universe with inertia and gravity until it is discovered by friendly search and rescue personnel. But this thing is good for you as your final destination. At least you don't have to expose your corpse to the wilderness. No, it should be said to be the corpse's outer space. Kaylan pushed Marshall's body into the rescue cabin and then pulled the release valve. I will help you publish your poem on the internet. Goodbye and have a good dream. Driven by the compressed gas, the silver-white rescue capsule quickly slid out of the empty ship, and with the blinking signal light, it slowly floated toward the deep black sky in the distance. When the power of the rescue capsule is exhausted and the signal light stops flashing, it will blend into the darkness and never be discovered again. At least that was Marshall's last wish. Perhaps Asano Akira should be allowed to see him off for the last time. Kaylan rubbed his hands with some relief. Oh, forget it, my head is fried, it's more dignified to leave like this. Kaylan just turned around and saw Zilugo inserting her slender white arms deep into the body of the puppet. One black and one white formed a very sharp visual contrast. She almost penetrated most of her body. Entering this pile of rotten meat, however, as soon as Kaylan thought that these rotten meat were originally part of her body, the sense of violation in the scene instantly decreased a lot. I found it. Zilugo withdrew from the rotten flesh. The black asphalt stained on her cheeks, arms, shoulders, and neck was quickly absorbed into her skin. In addition to the blood stains on her clothes, the body once again returned to its fair and flawless state. That half of the crystal. Yes, like a child offering a treasure to an adult, Ziluo carefully raised her cupped hands in front of Kaylan. In her palm lay an irregular crystal with the texture of obsidian. To be precise, half a pill. This thing can really control time, although Kaylan had experienced this magical ability countless times. When the real thing was presented in front of his eyes, he couldn't help but ask. Ziluo nodded. Then are you going to do this with this thing? Eat it, Kaylan asked. You come and absorb it and complete the half of the crystal in your body, Ziluo said. I'll absorb it? What about you? Only you can fuse it? I can only use its power, but I can't completely absorb it, Ziluo said, otherwise, I wouldn't be able to dig it out of the body of the puppet individual. PS Note 1, 18.4mm is the standard caliber of the common 12-gauge shotgun. Because writing 12-gauge 00 buckshot would be confusing to read, I changed the term. Numbers such as number 10, number 12, and number 16 refer to the caliber of the shotgun. This name comes from the caliber specifications of old-fashioned shotguns. At that time, shotguns could only fire round lead bullets, and 1 pound of lead could make the number of rounds of lead bullets represents the caliber of the shotgun using the lead bullets. For example, the lead bullets used in 12-gauge shotguns require 1/12 of a pound of lead to make. As for the 7 markings of 000, 00, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, they are exclusive markings for buckshot. The other 2 types of shotgun ammunition are special. One is birdshot similar to iron sand, and the other is unique headshot. This number represents the diameter of each lead shot or steel ball in a shot shell. No 000 has the largest diameter, which is 0.36 inches, and number 4 has the smallest diameter, which is 0.24 inches. 1 inch is 25 millimeters, you can convert it yourself. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 425. Then, if I fuse this thing, will it have any side effects on me? Kaylan asked worriedly. In many fantasy novels, most props that can quickly increase strength are accompanied by some weird side effects, such as the sunflower book that requires one to wield a sword from the palace, pills that will overdraw future potential and cause stagnant strength, etc. They are all relatively light, but I am afraid of the kind of things that will directly go crazy and explode to death. There are also the kind of treasures that will subtly affect the user's mind and even turn against the user. Such as a famous ring. You have already fused half of the crystal. If there are any side effects, they should have already appeared, Ziluo said. As for side effects, there don't seem to be any. Radiation resistance, rapid healing, these are all benign mutations, and there is no discomfort in the body. If I have to say side effects, it is probably that I often have nightmares and then hear the screams of the victims before they died. If it were a person with less mental endurance, he would have collapsed long ago. You fell into those dreams because of me. Because of this crystal, we have a very special connection. I can sense your presence no matter how far apart we are, even in stagnant time. Kaylan was stunned for a moment. What is this? A father-daughter love that transcends time and space? But having said that, if Ziluo is really a little human girl, it would actually be good to have a daughter like her, but her learning ability is too scary. Kaylan has only been in contact with her for just half a day, and it feels like the girl has grown from a babbling baby to an adult who can take charge of her own business. Her way of thinking is completely based on the standards of an adult, or even a centuries-old monster like Chiron. If the relationship between Ziluo and Kaylan was like that of father and daughter a few hours ago, now it is a bit closer to that of brother and sister. Kaylan even had a feeling that after some time, it would turn upside down, and become a mother and son, right? Sure enough, the creation of Alpha civilization cannot be measured by human standards. No matter how close her appearance is to humans, Her essence is still a creature that has existed for tens of thousands of years and is far more advanced than humans. Kaylan thought about what he had been worried about before. What if Ze-Luo loses interest in pretending to be human, an entertainment activity that is just like playing house for them? Would bringing her to the Ark be equivalent to bringing a time bomb? No, it should be said to be a time bomb. After all, in the eyes of advanced civilizations, the life of low-level civilizations can only be regarded as after-dinner pastimes, just like a child may stare at ants moving for several hours, or he may urinate on a whim, destroying the entire ant nest. But what makes Kaylan feel most tragic is that, he doesn't seem to reject Ze-Luo's capital. In addition, the remaining thoughts of the victims have dissipated with the death of the puppet individuals. You will not hear those voices in the future. Just when Kaylan was thinking wildly, Ze-Luo's cold voice without any emotion came again, bringing him back to reality. This is rare good news. Kaylan stretched out his hand, wanting to take the half-crystal in front of his eyes and take a closer look, but as soon as his hand came closer, the crystal suddenly floated towards him as if it was attracted. Just when Kaylan was about to retract his hand, the half of the crystal suddenly seemed to flash across the distance of more than 10 centimeters and penetrated into his palm. Kaylan didn't even feel pain. The crystal had penetrated into his skin and dissolved into his blood. Could this thing be a substitute messenger? Can they actually attract each other? Kaylan complained silently. Everything just happened so fast that he didn't even have time to make a surprised expression. Ze-Luo looked at Kaylan seriously, obviously thinking about what the substitute messenger in Kayan's words was. After all, such a wonderful metaphor would not appear in the vocabulary of ordinary humans. So, am I completed? I mean that half of the crystal in my body is now a complete one. Ze-Luo nodded. Then my abilities should also have changed, right? Ze-Luo nodded again. As the saying goes, seeing is worth hearing 100 times, so Kaylan decided to give it a try first to see what new changes the completed crystallization brought to his abilities. He took a deep breath and gently clenched his fists. The surrounding things instantly turned into black and white. Those wailing sounds that he had become accustomed to did not ring in Kayan's mind. Instead, there was an unbearable sting from deep in his brain. Ah! Kaylan let out a scream, immediately held his head with both hands and squatted down. At the same time, the effect of the time stop was also lifted, and everything around him returned to normal. It hurts, Kaylan said with trembling lips. Although the stinging pain was only for a moment, the impression it left on him was so profound that just recalling it made him shudder. This kind of stinging pain goes straight to the soul and cannot be resisted by human willpower alone. If it is not necessary, Kaylan will definitely not want to feel it even once. What on earth is going on? How come after the two halves of the crystal fuse, they will? He stood up from the ground, but suddenly felt dizzy. Fortunately, he held onto the railing on the side in time, so he didn't fall down. On the ground, Kaylan felt as if his brain had been hollowed out. The overwhelming feeling of sleepiness kept pouring out from the depths of his brain. Any slight movement made him feel as if there was some heavy liquid shaking in his head. It seemed that what was inside was not brain matter, but mercury that was much denser than brain matter. No. It just seemed. Although the memory was painful, Kaylan still forced himself to try to recall the scene just now. He clearly remembered that when he screamed and held his head with his hands, the surrounding scenes were still in black and white, until his body began to squat, and the world returned to color. In other words, the screams he made and the movements of holding his head with both hands were completed in a state of pause. Doesn't this mean that I have the ability to stop and carry out activities? Is this the upgraded version 2.0 of Time Stop? Kaylan seemed to have forgotten his physical discomfort and looked at his hands in astonishment. So, that tingling feeling, is because of me. His mental energy was drained instantly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 426. If you can stop your activities at the moment, wouldn't this really become Dior's smashing Verido? Kaylan rubbed his forehead. This thing, could it really be a humming substitute? It is a good thing that his skills have become stronger. As a senior Joe chef who has read comics 1 to 8 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure several times, Kaylan certainly knows what a perverted ability this is. However, the second 0.0 version of the time stop skill, this mana consumption is really too scary. Originally, Kaylan activated time stop, which could last for several seconds at most. If it was divided into multiple activations, the total duration could be extended to a quite exaggerated level, but now, after just using it, it feels like the mental energy has been almost drained, and it is simply impossible to use it in actual combat. Unless he can make his mental power strong enough to be like a monster. Thinking of this, Kaylan subconsciously looked at Ziluo, who was looking at the messy pile of corpses of the puppet individuals on the ground, wondering what he was thinking. Well, the ship will naturally go straight when it reaches the bridge, let's consider these things later, Kaylan thought to himself, walked back to the control terminal, turned on the broadcast switch in the hangar, and said into the microphone. The matter has been resolved. Yvonne, Layton, and Akira Asano, please come to the bridge. The others can rest where they are. 5 days later, in the 4th district of Arc East, the Hunting God Hunting Group headquarters, the group leader's office. Kaylan, who was wearing a floral shirt and beach shorts of the same style, was lying on a leather boss's chair. His feet with flip-flops between his toes were placed on the desk in an extremely arrogant posture. A very rare paper of this era. The book was spread out over his face, and slight snores continued to come from under the book. It has been 4 days since he came back from the South 16th District. During these 4 days, Kaylan spent almost 80% of the time sleeping, and the rest of the time, except for eating, bathing, and going to the toilet. He was quietly practicing the 2.0 version of the time stop skill in his room. Although the duration of the skill did not become longer, and the stinging feeling deep in his brain did not lessen, but at least, he would not scream out in agony due to the severe pain. In the past few days, Kaylan wondered more than once whether he had a masochistic nature in his bones, but every time after his mental state recovered, he couldn't help but try again. This kind of power is really too attractive. Even if it was only for a short moment, even if he had to endure great pain, when Kaylan stepped into the world of black and white, he could not help but be intoxicated. If you use the words of the psychopath who doesn't want to be human, then this is almost power from the gods. Although Kaylan doesn't want to admit it, when the skill is activated, he will always have the illusion that he is the master of this world. Sure enough, I still read too many online articles. Kaylan reached out his hand, lifted a corner of the book covering his face, and looked at Ziluo, who was sitting on the sofa opposite his work. The girl's sitting posture was impeccable. She placed her hands squarely on her knees, her head lowered slightly, and she was concentrating on the tablet computer placed on the coffee table. That was the only request Ziluo made to Kaylan after arriving here. This tablet computer stores all the books and documents that can be downloaded in the Arc library, from the ancient text rubbings on the Rosetta Stone to the cool novels of the overbearing president and the son-in-law of the god of war in the Middle and Late Earth era. Almost everything. During these 4 days, apart from eating, bathing, and going to the toilet, Ziluo did everything he could to read. Unlike Kaylan, she never sleeps. Although Kaylan told her that as a human, she should maintain at least 6-8 hours of sleep every day, but even in bed, the girl is still holding the tablet computer, hungry reading. On Ziluo's face, there was no other expression other than seriousness. Her pupils reflected the dense text, which was scrolling on the screen at an extremely fast speed. Not only did she not sleep, the reading speed is more than 10 times that of normal humans. With this kind of energy, in the old era, it would have been easy to get into any Ivy League school. This is what the hunting dog said about her. As for Zlogo's identity, it was Chiron who single-handedly took care of it. When the group returned to the Ark, Zlogo already had a complete and legal identity certificate, including a series of records from his birth to his current location. The resume can be found in the archives, and it is so detailed that it is almost impossible to find fault. Outside the group leader's office is the office area for Hound and other senior managers of the hunting group. Of course, it's an office area, but it's actually just a common room. Several solid wood desks were moved to the walls, and an exquisitely crafted billiard table was moved to the center of the office. Oh, I haven't received any commissions for a week. I'm sitting on nothing, Hound sat on the sofa next to the billiard table, holding in his arms a billiard cue that sells for more than 4 figures in the market, and kept talking. I thought to myself. It used to be okay, one person could eat enough and the whole family wouldn't be hungry, but now the whole hunting group has hundreds of mouths to eat. Oh, and there are also those iron lumps in the underground hangar for humming maintenance. Motor oil is more expensive than the oil that people eat. That guy Kaylan left everything to me and became a hands-off shopkeeper. This brat, he didn't know that firewood and rice are expensive when he is not a family, but now he has to spend so much every day. I have a lot of money, but I don't get a penny from it. Oh, I'm so worried. Weren't there 2 commissions that came to my door yesterday? Why did you push me, old dog? Leighton leaned on the back of the sofa, holding an extra-large bag of potato chips in his arms. A mission to explore D-class ruins is too shameful. We are a consortium-level hunting group. People come to us with this kind of mission and it is clear that they look down on us, Hound said. As for the other one, it is even more outrageous. They actually asked us to escort a transport team. Shouldn't we go to mercenaries or PMCS for this damn thing? What are they doing to us? If I hadn't had a good temper, I would have scolded those 2 idiots. Speaking of escort missions, I heard some outrageous news recently. Ivan, who was lying on the table hitting the ball, raised his head and said, "What news?" "Tell me," Leighton responded with interest. It seems that a woman wanted to inspect her family's property in the wilderness and recruited several mercenaries as bodyguards. On the way, she suddenly pulled out a gun and killed the mercenary driving the car. Huh? What kind of drama is this? Is the mercenary dishonest? Is he just looking for sex? Or does he want to kill people and buy goods? Hound asked. I don't know if she's committing murder, but it's highly unlikely that she'll be motivated by sex. That employer, she seems to weigh more than 300 kilograms, and she's nearly 40 years old. I don't think anyone would care about her. Is such a woman interested in sex? Ivan muttered. Don't be too absolute, maybe some people's XP is more biased. Thanks to LSP and Xiaojia Erlang for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 427. Then this guy has quite a strong taste. Ivan shook his head and hit the black 8 into the bag with a beautiful flip ball. Oops, another shot to clear the table. My butt has never sat up from the sofa. I won't play anymore. Doctor, you are a swindler. Seeing the black ball fall into the pocket, the Hound immediately grabbed it. He shouted while holding his club. Why did I cheat? You watched me hit every ball, Ivan said to the Hound with a smile while taking out the table tennis balls from the bag. There must be something wrong with your robotic arm. I can guarantee it. To be honest, have you tampered with anything? The Hound said confidently. My mechanical prosthesis is controlled by myoelectric signals. Daily maintenance and upkeep are done by me and Leighton. You can ask Leighton whether I have tampered with the prosthetic limb, Ivan said, looking at all the people. Valentina, who was watching the battle from the sidelines, waved, want to have a round? I won't. Valentina crossed her arms on her chest and shook her head, and I know I can't beat you. Look, even Valentina refuses to fight you. There must be something wrong, right? Leighton, Hound said excitedly, as if he had grasped something. That's just an ordinary mechanical prosthetic limb. At most, it can alleviate some of the recoil when shooting. Unless this prosthetic limb is connected to a computer that can analyze the trajectory of the shot, it can achieve the effect you said, old dog. That kind of effect, being able to clear the table with one stroke, is entirely due to the doctor's skill. I have been observing his hands, they are so stable, there is not even a trace of tremor when hitting the ball. TCH, you two guys know how to join forces to bully a lonely old man like me, right? It's boring. Hound waved his hand and threw the club in his hand to Leighton. Let's get back to what we were talking about earlier. That topic, that shooting, I always felt like something was wrong. It's not like there's something wrong, it's just that there's nothing right at all. It's just outrageous. It's so humming outrageous, Leighton said. No, what I feel puzzling about is, Hound stood up, walked to the freezer nearby, and took out a can of soda. If the reports in the news are not wrong, this woman's family owns an industry in the wilderness, then this family must be a big family, and at worst it would be at the level of a third-rate consortium. He opened the tube of the soda can, raised his head and took a big sip, and then said, "Do you think that such a big family will not have private guards, and they actually need to spend money to hire PMC people to protect themselves? Isn't this a bit too nonsense?" There are even more nonsense. I don't know when. Kaylan has walked out of the team leader's office. He is holding a miniature holographic projector in his hand. A blue light shrouds the billiard table, and a section is a bit blurry. The video was played in front of everyone. What is this? Leighton was stunned for a moment, then turned around and asked. Some big guys in the hacker forum hacked into the official database, dug out the recorded videos taken by the car surveillance cameras, and threw them online. As Kaylan said, in the video you can see two people sitting in the front and passenger seats. Perhaps because the road conditions in the wilderness are not very good, the camera is always a little bumpy, but you can still barely see the picture clearly. The appearance of the two people sitting in the driver's seat was a middle-aged mercenary. He was wearing a standard brown combat uniform. His hair was wrapped with a camouflage turban. There was a scar across half of his face above his cheekbones, but he had a beard. He was cleanly shaved and had a cigarette in his mouth that was common in mercenary circles, but he did not light it. He held the steering wheel with both hands and stared intently at the road ahead. From time to time he would say a few words into the intercom on his shoulder. His expression could not be said to be relaxed, but he did not look as nervous as a rookie who had just entered the industry. Next to him, a big lump of fat took up all the space in the passenger seat. Fortunately, this was an armored off-road vehicle with a relatively spacious interior. If it were replaced by an economical and practical one, in a small car, even the gear lever located between the driver's and passenger seats is probably held down by her. No way, medical beauty technology has become so advanced these days. If you are a rich person, it should be easy to lose weight through surgery, right? Being so fat may seriously affect your health, right? Looking at the video, heroine, Yvonne, a doctor, couldn't help but frowned. Who knows, maybe it's because of fear. Leighton scratched his head with his mechanical hand. The first 10 seconds of the video were relatively peaceful, but at the 20th second, the woman took out a pistol from the handbag she was carrying with some difficulty and inspected it repeatedly. At this time, the middle-aged mercenary sitting in the driver's seat turned his head to glance at the woman, and then turned his head back again. Maybe he thought it was normal to carry a pistol with him in the dangerous wilderness. Plus this woman was his employer. The mercenary did not say anything more, but continued to hold the steering wheel and drive the car. When the video played to the 34th second, the woman suddenly observed the surrounding environment. then suddenly raised the gun in her hand and pointed the muzzle at the neck of the middle-aged mercenary who was driving, as if she was crazy. He was screaming and pulling the trigger again and again, and the blood that spewed out even stained the lens of the camera. Then, there was a sudden breaking, the entire screen turned sideways, the screen went black, and the video ended. The people around the pool table all fell into an eerie silence. It took more than 10 seconds before Layton said with some uncertainty, "This humming murder, right? This is murder." Hound smacked his thigh hard. "Damn it, if I were this guy's teammate, I would have to light up this bitch's sky lantern." The mercenaries in the other vehicles didn't know what happened. They thought the gun had misfired at first, so they allowed the woman to return to the Ark safely. Kaylan shrugged, but they never expected that this move has brought huge trouble to everyone involved in the escort mission, including the PMC behind them. Trouble? What trouble? The family behind that woman immediately asked PMC to compensate for medical expenses, mental damages, and other expenses totaling 15 million credits. They also planned to take the mercenaries and PMC who performed the mission to court. They believed that the mercenaries' mistake led to this accident, Kaylan said slowly.